This is part 6 of the Oroco resource video series. This is the last part of the series. I will probably be doing more updates in the future, but as far as the introduction to Oroco resources, this is the last video. In the last video you learned why drilling is important, and I gave you 4 reasons. One is to confirm the data. 2, the resource will get bigger. Then the high grade portion will get bigger, and also Oroco will earn more ownership interest by spending money on the property. Now, as promised, I said I was going to talk about the upside. We already know that if we can just confirm the data, get the resource up to 43101 compliant, maybe get a feasibility study done, the net present value of 1.6 billion in comparison to what you're paying for the stock is absolutely incredible. Now, but I'm here to tell you that there is even more upside than $1.6 billion. You see, when this deposit was drilled, this was many years ago. At that time, Santa Tomas would not even been considered an economic deposit the way we know about it right now. Because back then, in order for a deposit to be economic, it had to have much higher grade. So at that time, when they were drilling it, they were looking for a completely different deposit. Now, they also didn't have the kind of technology that we have today. And what you have on the screen in front of you is what Oroco is in the process of doing, which is 3D IP, which stands for 3D Induced Polarization Survey. And as you can see, it's a grid that stretches from the Brazil zone, goes through the north zone and south zone. If we look at the map that I showed you before, it's pretty much the Brazil zone, north zone, and south zone. So in other words, the 3D IP will be done throughout this area. And what the 3D IP will do is it will show where copper is in this area, but it will not show the grade, obviously. But when the holes were drilled here in the past, they didn't have that kind of tool. They were just drilling based on very limited information. Now we can pretty much scan this area, know where copper exists, and then we can stick holes in it and then determine whether the particular area has high enough grade to be promising. Also, in the prior video I told you that the most beneficial thing for Santa Tomas will be if they are able to expand the high grade zone. I mean, it's practically mathematically 100% certainty that the resource will get bigger, but the most beneficial thing will be if there could be more of the higher grade material. You see, in the prior video I showed you that if you change the grade from, let's say, 0.3% and you assume the copper price of $3, you're looking at a yearly profit of $135 million. And while this is impressive, such a profit is not big enough to cover or make to cover the capex and make a mining company excited about this project, because it would take, under such profits, it would take more than 10 years to cover, even without looking at taxes, it would take more than 10 years to cover the capex of $1.5 billion. Therefore, if the grade goes from 0.3 to, let's say, 0.5%, now the whole game changes, because now the yearly profit is 500 million, and in under such scenario it would only take, again, this is just, no taxes. It would only take, about 3 years to cover the cost of the capex, and then after the capex is covered, then the rest goes straight to the bottom line. And if you have a high grade portion of the deposit that lasts you 10 years, and you can generate, let's say, $5 billion worth of profit during that 10 years, 1.5 goes to paying for the capex. After 10 years, you don't really care if you're running low grade material. Like, let's say, if after 10 years, even if you're mining 0.3 and, let's say copper doesn't go anywhere and you're only making $135 million per year, that's fine, because your capex has already been covered many years ago, and now whatever you make from it is just extra. But if you only have lower grade like this, and it takes you 10 to 15 years to cover the capex, well, under such scenario, then the project doesn't really make sense at the current prices. If copper were to go to $4, well, that's a different story. But right now, we're most likely not going to be using that number in the next couple of years, unless we can see copper prices all of a sudden take off. So with the current technology, if we can run 3D IP in this area, and then it shows us that there's more copper, we could potentially see more high-grade material in the north zone and even in the south zone, but maybe even in Papago 17. This is a particular concession here that was very much an interest to Oroco, and that's why I acquired it. But one area that is the most interesting, in my opinion, is the Brazil zone. If you see here, notice there's 3 holes in the Brazil zone. Now, those 3 holes were drilled. But according to my scuttlebutt, and as you know, I talk to a lot of people when I do my investments, inside the company and outside of the company, the data for those 3 holes has been lost. And based on my scuttlebutt, there are rumors that the results for these 3 holes were absolutely incredible. Now, just keep in mind that this is speculation. No one has any proof for it, but some people remember what these numbers were. And I've heard numbers as high as 1% or 0.8. Now, if this were true, if the company drills and it turns out to be, 1% or 0.8%, the entire game changes. If they hit 1% on this, and they do it with a few holes, the game is over. They're going to get acquired quicker than you can get your shares. And here's why. If we go back to this calculation, and if we put 1%, yearly profit on such a thing would go to $1.5 billion for 1 year. If we get it at 0.8%, yearly profit is still at 1.1 billion. Notice, that's just 1 year. Even if we look at 0.6%, $760 million. So, if the rumors turned out to be correct, that this area here contains even higher grade than what we already know is in the north zone, I think $5 per share would be history. Now, if I was paying $5 per share for the stock today, counting that there is something here based on some rumors or based on the scuttlebutt that I did, then I wouldn't necessarily be interested in this. But if I know that based on this data here, the net present value is about $1.6 billion, and I'm paying less than 100 millions market cap for it, and then I have a possibility of, well, it's not just a pure speculation. It's based on some of my conversations. If this is true and they hit something here, then buying the stock at these prices, it's even more of a no-brainer. So as promised, this is the last video. This is a little bit of an upside. If there's more exploration success, again, we don't need the exploration success. What we need is for drilling to confirm the historical data, for drilling to maybe expand the resource a little bit, maybe get the high grade portion a little bit bigger than it is, but we don't really need to. And of course, increase our ownership in Santa Tomas because of that extra spending on the property. And if we get something extra in the Brazil zone that can make this investment even better, then sign me up.